In tonight's secret episode, an interview with Paul Rodgers.
Good evening, custardites. Now, I don't know if you can see this in this light. This is a cover of something that I got only today. It's a test pressing of an album which I didn't think I wanted. Now, it's been knocking about on Amazon for a while, and the picture on the cover doesn't actually show what it is. Now, what it is, it's Bad Company, unplugged acoustic set live at the Hall of Fame. Now, the picture on the front makes it look as though it's something reasonably recent, where Paul Rodgers has been going around with maybe just Simon Kirke and one or two other people. It's actually recorded in 1999, just after they bought the anthology, and it's got the original four members on it. It's got Paul Rodgers, Simon Kirke, Buzz Burrell, and Mick Ralphs. And it's all pretty light-hearted, sort of casual stuff, acoustic versions of a few of Bad Company's better-known tracks. And it's absolutely stunning quality as well. Now, I hadn't thought it was going to be anything particularly special, but it really is good. Anyway, I've since discovered that this isn't an official release at all. It's one of those slightly iffy things. So, what I'm saying to you now is you can pick this up from Amazon for about a tenner on CD. The sound quality on it is so good. If you're a Bad Company fan, you really do need to get it. I didn't even know it was available on vinyl. Apparently it is. I've got this test pressing, and the sound on this is great. It's on a double album, so it's not all that long. It only lasts about 60 minutes altogether. And the final 25 minutes of it is a Paul Rodgers interview. Now, it's a really interesting Paul Rodgers interview. And it's interesting for me because it shows that not only me and Paul Rodgers like the same sort of things in music, but he also talks about his liking for the racehorse and how him and his wife have put lots of money into homes of retired racehorses and all that sort of stuff. So it's fascinating interview. So I'm going to take a bit of a risk. What I'm going to do, I'm going to drop the needle on side 4, and I'm going to go and sit down, listen to it again with a drink, and leave this playing. So all you'll see is the record going around. So you can make your own pictures up in your mind. Not sure whether it'll get banned from YouTube or whatever, but the people that have put it out haven't got the rights to put it out in the first place. I've got no idea who the interviewer bloke is from Canada, but he seemed like a reasonably decent sort of chap. So if you're him, send me a message and say hello. If you want to take it down, I'll take it down. If I want to give you a name check, I'll give you a name check. I just think it's a fascinating little chat with Paul Rodgers about some stuff. And yeah, one or two other things that Paul Rodgers mentions in this have sort of resonate with some things that have happened for me lately as well, which I'll let you in on maybe at a later date. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to put this down, I'm going to drop the needle, I'm going to take my little glass of vino, sit over there, Custard Central's main listening seat, and you know, listen to this interview with Paul Rodgers. Brilliant stuff.
And now, please welcome the exceptional artist, Paul Rodgers.
So much. Thank you very much.
I'm glad you're here. We're all glad you're here.
Great, thank you. It's fantastic. It's a great honor, and I'm really very, very pleased and honored to be accepted as a citizen. It's very nice.
It's not like you just got to Canada. You've been coming here for many, many years, not just touring, but actually residing to the west.
Well, it's true. I've lived here for some 15 years now in BC, and I got married here. I married a Canadian lady, Cynthia, my darling wife. Where are you? She's out there somewhere. And after 15 years, I thought, well, it's about time I sort of took the final step. So we did that, and it's good.
A lot of the people in the room probably haven't been through the process. What is it like to actually go through that? What do you have to do to become a Canadian citizen?
Oh, well, they made it very easy for me actually down at Surrey. There's a few forms to fill in, and we went through the routine, and we went down, and there was a good 200 people from all walks of life. It was quite amazing. There was people from Afghanistan, from Iran, Iraq, Jamaica. There was a Scottish guy there. It was amazing actually, the cross section of people, and we all sang the national anthem, and they had me get up and sing the national anthem. At very short notice. I mean, I don't know if you know the national anthem most people can get it through the first couple of verses and then they mumble off. So it was a sudden thing, but it was okay.
Were there whispers in the room? Did people recognize you? Did they know who you were?
A couple of people did, yeah.
Yeah. So you led them in a rousing rendition.
I did. In fact, the mic actually blew up. So I started singing and it went...
For real?
It did. And I hadn't realised because everyone was singing away furiously. And the guy came up to me and said, "Can you use this mic here?" Yeah. So there was a mic right stuck on the table, so I used that one.
Not everything works so well in the Canadian government system,
Wow,
apparently.
it was great.
Paul, is it true what Jim Morrison said, that the West is the best, since you're living out West? How do you feel about West versus East?
Oh, I like it all. I'm not going to get into that thing, really. Because, I live out in BC, and I find it's just beautiful all over Canada. I'd like to travel a lot more than I have done already, because I've basically sort of lived here and gone touring, basically. I've gone to Japan, I go to Europe, and come back home. And what I like about where I live in the Okanagan there is that it's very quiet and peaceful when I come back off the road. I like that.
A lot of stoplights in your town, I understand.
There's no stoplights in the little town that I live in. No, it's just a hardware store and that's it.
Obviously, Paul's going to perform for us in a little bit, including fantastic, including one song, back to the first album, the 1974 self-titled debut from the wonderful Bad Company. I want to commend you. It strikes me as a real pleasure for all of us to be able to hear your music this many years later. What you've got, I don't have a better expression for it, but it's the cool gene. In that I'm not going to disparage anyone by comparing you to specific people, but sometimes later in a man's or a woman's career, there doesn't seem to be as much of that cool gene. That gets cabaret-ish. It can be sound satirical or self-parody.
I can do cabaret.
Well, that's...
I left my heart. No, I thank you. I appreciate that. But I think the people I listen to, I think, were very cool. People like John Lee Hooker, Otis Redding, Wilson Pickett and James Brown. And those people were, well, they were the epitome of cool. When I heard them singing and performing, I just, like, the hairs on my arms just went up, and I the way they made me feel is, I said, that's what I want to do. I want to try and do that. And I've been trying ever since,
The earliest memories of singing in the house, was it in front of the mirror? When did this voice come to you? When did you realize, I've got this voice, I need to share it? Were you a kid?
No, I didn't used to sing in front of the mirror. I can't recall ever doing that. But I sort of discovered I could sing when I was about 12 or so. I got very interested in music. The Beatles came out, then there was the Stones, and I dug a little deeper and I discovered blues and soul and all of that. And there was a band of older boys, they were probably about 17 or 18. To me, they was kind of really grown up, and they let me go up to the mic and sing one day. And I sort of went up to the mic and I sort of went, "Good golly, Miss Molly!" like that, and they went, "Oh." And I could see that they thought that was kind of okay. And I thought from then, okay, I think maybe I'll be a singer, I don't know, something like that. Sorry about the shouting.
The song I was sort of referring to about the cool gene being very present and prevalent still in your career was the track you did back in December, released it as a CD single. It's getting airplay on the radio in North America. It's doing quite well. Tell us a bit about that song.
Well, I've been writing songs with various people actually, but this particular song I wrote with a chap called Perry Mergeloff, who has a studio over there in New York, and it's all analog. And he sent me this track, and I thought, wow, this is such a great sound. There's something about the sound I really like. And I called him and said, what is the deal with the sound? And he said, well, it was all recorded analog, with tape machines and valves and the old way of doing things. And that gave it a certain warmth, like we had in the 70s. Digital's great, it's very convenient and everyone goes for that. It's great for DJs, you can play records a lot easier and more efficiently. But I do love vinyl. I love the sound of that old sound of tape and all of that. And so I liked this track, and I worked on it. We went backwards and forwards, sending it. He lives in New York and I'm in BC, so we were sending things backwards and forwards. And we ended up with this really nice track. And we said, okay, great, what are we going to do with it, So we said, well, we both support charities. His is a horse sanctuary in New York called Seraphim, and mine is a racehorse sanctuary in England. And we said, well, let's just put it out there, because you can do that nowadays, and put all the proceeds to the charities. Basically, that's what we've done.
Tell us about this charity. I mean, you have a house full of animals, cats and dogs, and you have an affinity, obviously, for horses, because what happens to racehorses at the end of their career?
Well, Deborah Bonham, who's John Bonham's sister, she introduced my wife to this horse sanctuary. And what they do in England, they rescue these racehorses. At the end of their career, very often, they are slaughtered. People think that they live a nice, life in a meadow and it's all very lovely, but it's not. Very often they're slaughtered. And so my wife Cynthia got involved with the sanctuary. She went down there and she said to me, you have to come and see these horses, So eventually I went down there, and I just couldn't believe that they would consider shooting these fantastic creatures. They're such a fantastic spirit. They're enormous, they're huge horses, and they just look down at you, and they've got this amazing spirit. And you think, wow, how could anyone just shoot this because it's too expensive to keep? And that's what Graham and Sue, the people that run the sanctuary, that's how they feel. And they feel so strongly about it that at one point, they were so low with finances that they were sleeping in the stable for 6 months with the horses. So Cynthia and I, we said, well, we can do something here, so let's do what we can. And we helped them find a new farm. It's a 40-acre place down there, so they've resited. And we did a show there for them and raised some funds. So we're doing what we can, and then we've got the record out as well. So it's just a little thing that we're doing that we feel good about doing,
And the track is called With Our Love.
Yeah.
So if you support that track, I think you're going to like it. It's really cool. Trust me, have a listen to it, and you'll be supporting a great cause and hearing a great tune. Another track you've done fairly recently, and another cause that's commendable, Amnesty International. The Dylan track, Abandoned Love. Did you pick the track? Or do you have choice in the matter?
Yes, they sent us a list of songs. My first choice would have been Mr. Tambourine Man or something like that, but I thought, well, that could be a little bit typical, so let's find something that's really obscure. And we found this track called Abandoned Love, which had been recorded by George Harrison, and I think the Everly Brothers did a version of it too. So it hasn't been really overdone. And I called up a good friend of mine, Nils Lofgren, who's a big Bob Dylan fan, and I asked him if he would, help me with the track. And it wasn't the easiest of tracks, because Bob Dylan writes lyrics, it's poetry really. It's almost, sometimes it's not a song, it's just reams of lyrics, And so you had to create a musical bed for it that built, throughout the song. And that was the challenge with doing that. And Nils was great. There's so much color that he put into it, musically. And that's what we did. We did that. It was great.
The track, again, is wonderful, and it has that cool gene. Maybe on the poster you saw neighborhood of 30 albums since 1968, closing in on something like 90 million plus records sold around the world. Beyond the numbers, Paul, how do you measure success in your career?
Oh, that's a good question. I have been successful with quite a few bands, with Free, with Bad Company, with The Firm, even with Queen. I measure success, I think, by how happy I am and how free I feel every day. And I do find when, this is just me though, not everybody else feels the same way, of course, but I found it very restrictive to be in a band with a name where everyone has got equal say in what you do. It's fine as long, it's like a chariot, come back to horses. As long as the horses are all pulling in the same direction, it works really well. But when they start pulling off in different directions, that's where life gets a little complicated, and that's how it's been for me. So I found that ultimately the best thing that I could do was to create a solo band in which, basically I call the shots. I hate to say that, it sounds a little egotistical, but that's the kind of deal when the guys come in, they understand that's what we'll be doing. And I pick songs I've written from Free, from Bad Company, The Firm, and new songs, and I can paint a broader palette, and it really works well for me, So that's currently what I'm doing.
People are probably thinking, what's a good example of what you just talked about? What's a good example of what you just talked about, how people are pulling in a different direction among your previous bands? Is there something that broke the camel's back in one of those scenarios because of that?
Well, if I go back all the way, really, to Free, I miss that band. We had such a great band together, but when I look back, we were very young. We were kind of under the radar as far as commerciality was concerned, and we were managing ourselves, and we were playing blues, and we started to write songs, and all of a sudden we had this monster hit, and I don't think we were ready for it at all, I wanted at one point to go back to the blues, because or at least, reintroduce more of the blues back into the set. Nobody else wanted to do it, so we were pulling in different directions musically. But it was a good band, and it still stood the test of time, I think.
I woke up singing Fire and Water, in the shower. It wasn't very good, but the song's great.
I'm sure it was great.
The revival of 60s American blues, in the 60s of American blues from the Mississippi Delta from decades before that, in England was so prevalent, and it launched so many careers, obviously yours, and Clapton's and Beck's and all the guys that were fans of Alexis Corner, and John Mayall helped that launch pad. What was it about that American blues from the Mississippi Delta that it was so attractive to teenagers in England?
It's a good question, and I really am not sure about the answer. I can give all kinds of hypotheses, and I can guess. I'm from a working class town in the northeast of England, which was shipbuilding and steelworking and chemical industries. And when I heard the blues, I heard something very exotic, and they were singing about, places a long way away and jumping on trains and disappearing for thousands of miles. And it was a kind of freedom that you couldn't even conceive of in the northeast of England. And I think that partly the theme of it was that was part of the attraction. But just the music itself, the 12-bar blues, and the way that on a 12-bar blues, there's possibly millions of 12-bar blues written, and that structure is still good enough to where you can write another million songs on the 12-bar blues. It's that versatile. I'd like to know a song structure on which, another song structure other than the 12-bar blues, that you can do that on. It's quite incredible. So it's amazingly versatile.
Beyond the classic polka, beyond that, no, kidding. I want to thank you, Paul, for contributing to my Beatles show. I have a series called The Complete Beatles, and you may not be aware, somebody asked you, what are your favorite Beatles songs? And I was thrilled that you picked not only one from the early days, but a more psychedelic one. You picked She Loves You, and you picked I Am the Walrus.
Oh, yeah.
And I wanted to know more about your affinity for the Beatles and how profoundly they affected you when you were young.
Well, the Beatles were a fantastic influence for me, because if you look at England, Liverpool is there, and Middlesbrough is just across the country on the East Coast, So when I looked at them and I saw their success and their happiness, they were so, you saw them doing interviews, and they have this great repartee between them, And they made such amazing music, and they seemed to be so free, you know. I thought, well, if they can do it, maybe I could, you know. And really, that was all it took. I loved what they did. Yeah.
And you had that in mind when you did Shooting Star, obviously. Johnny was a schoolboy, he was...
Yeah. I included the Beatles in that lyric. But the song, Shooting Star, by that time, you know, it was a songwriter. I had discovered songwriting when I was 17, and I discovered it was a great means of expressing some of my inner, you know, the anger that I felt. I was a very angry young person, you know, like a lot of people are. And on stage I found that I could get that out of my system, you know, and writing songs was part of that. With Shooting Star, it was a case of, you know, looking around and seeing so many people were not making it. You know, Jimi Hendrix and just Janis Joplin and all these great people who by right were very young and they were dying. And I was thinking, well, this is the entertainment business. It's not a war zone. Why are so many people dying? So that was really the birth of the idea for Shooting Star. You know, it's kind of a warning in a way.
Young people, you know, Janice and Jim and Jimmy, all 27, but even younger than that, your own guitarist in Free, Paul was 25.
Yeah. I mean, I still miss, we called him Koss, you know, Paul Kossoff. His nickname was Koss. And yeah, we spent a lot of time on the road together. You know, he used to drive and I used to be the co-pilot. I'd sit right next to him and keep him awake, you know. And yeah, I miss him quite a lot. And I think he was a casualty really of the band splitting up, you know. I didn't realize he would just kind of go down that fast. That's the trouble, you know, with drugs really, I guess, you know, the heavier drugs, man, is that they do destroy your mind. You know, you get a great lift for a moment or two, but ultimately they are not really the great promise. They don't deliver on the promise at all, you know, in terms of, we used to think in those days, I mean, if you take this, you'll be really creative and you'll be really amazing and like you'll be like Jimi Hendrix. Well, not really, you know. I mean, the passion for music comes from within. It can't be falsely created by any other outside source. It comes from inside, you know. So that's the lesson.
Were there times when you nearly went down that dark path yourself, though?
Well, it was all around me, you see. So it was kind of almost normal. It was almost normal to just take whatever was there, and there was a lot of cocaine, there was a lot of drugs around, and yeah, sure, you know, like everybody else, but I did draw the line at one point. And in fact, you know, I mean, I can tell a secret in a way. That's probably what split Bad Company and myself. I stopped all that, you know, and all of a sudden I felt like I was the outsider of the band. And it was a strange feeling, you know. I used to say, hey, come on, you guys, I know what's going on. You don't have to hide all this crap from me. I know just do your thing. I'm not criticizing, I'm not judging. But I think that's one of the things about that stuff is that it can make people a little paranoid too about people that aren't doing it, you know? So you're like, oh, you're like the policeman or something. It's like, well, so that's one of the reasons I think that, you know, that we ended up parting company, really.
Randy, you toured with Buckman Turner.
Yeah.
And Randy had a rule because he'd been in the Guess Who and he didn't want to be around that element anymore. So in BTO, there was a rule. We don't do this. We're musicians. This is a business. And invariably they ended up making a lot of money, making a wonderful career out of it. Have you and he had discussions about any of this stuff?
Not actually, no, but I mean, I totally agree with that. And Fred's a great guy too. I love Fred.
He's a sweetheart, isn't he?
Yeah, they're fantastic guys, and great musicians too. But I think that it's true that music is about expressing yourself, you know. And you know, I think now if Jimi Hendrix, for instance, was still alive today and had been allowed to mellow like Ray Charles or, you know, Miles Davis or like that, we would have had so much more amazing music from him, I think.
Rolling Stone magazine's list of the greatest singers of all time, they do pretty good lists, as lists go. It has you 3 slots ahead of Christina Aguilera. four ahead of Rod Stewart. Christina's a good singer, like her.
Rod Stewart, I gotta say, I love Rod Stewart. When I heard him with Jeff Beck, and they had a record, it was
Truth.
I think it was the B-side of
It's a single.
Of what's that record? High Hill Silver Lining. I think it was on the B-side of that, and it was called Rock My Plimsoll.
Brilliant.
Which is a really weird title. I don't know why they called it that. It was basically that old blues thing, Rock Me Baby, you know. But when that combination of voice and guitar, and it was the bass player was Ronnie Wood.
Ronnie was playing bass.
Ronnie Wood, yeah. And it was it was You Can't Rock Me. It was just amazing. When I heard that, I thought that's it. That's what you got to do. Rod doesn't sing like that too much anymore. He does other things, and that's fine. You know, he does what he wants to do. But that was fantastic.
Rod and Robert Plant and so many vocalists and so many people that aren't even world-class entertainers. We all tend to lose a bit of our range. Less so with you, evidently. What do you attribute that to?
Well, people do ask me that. I've been thinking about it, and I don't think about what my range is. I don't think about it. It's not about what my range is. Am I keeping my range? It's about, do I feel this? If I can feel it, I can hit those notes. Do you know what I mean? And I'm careful about. I hear some singers, and they're good singers, and they're warming up, but they're warming up too hard. That one of the things that I would avoid doing. Supposing you had a Maserati or a Lamborghini, and it was cold. Yeah, you wish. We all wish. And it was cold. You wouldn't start the engine and hit the gas to warm it up, would you? And that's the same with your voice. You want to warm it up gently, just humming and things like that, so that you build up, so that by the time you want to be full on, you're fully warmed up. That's what I would say.
I suspect there's people in the room that are here because they are singers or would aspire to be singers. Do you have anything beyond the warm-up idea in terms of tips for someone who wants to make a living being a vocalist?
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
I'm really not an expert. I've lived the business, and I ought to not be able to say something here, but I think, what is it? I do think you have to believe in what you're doing, and you have to stay with it. I remember being in London, and I was 17, and all the guys, I came down with a bunch of guys we called ourselves the Roadrunners, and then we changed our name to the Wildflowers, because that was cooler, right? And they decided they were going to go back home, and I found myself in London, whole jobless, basically, without any connections at all, and I had a 100-watt Selmer amp, I had 3 Shure microphones, and a couple of broken down speakers, and I was out of business, really. So what I did, I sat back, and I think what you have to use is your intelligence and your intuition to make it, I said, okay, how do I get back into business? I sold 2 of the microphones and kept 1. I sold the 100-watt amp, and I bought a 50-watt system. So I had 1 mic and a 50-watt system, and I was back in business. I got the Melody Maker, which is I think it's still going. It was and they had in the back of the Melody Maker, they had singer looking for job, band looking for singer, And I found a band looking for a singer. I called them up and joined a band and got back into business. And the thing to do is to stay out there, to stay on the scene, as it were, because as a result of that, I was playing with, and I gave them the name the Brown Sugar, and we were playing in a blues club together, and we were playing blues, when Paul Kossoff came up and asked if you could come up and have a jam. And that's how Free was born. So, you stay with it however you can. I think that's the thing to remember.
There you go. Fascinating stuff. Let's hope that can stay up. The voice of rock, except nobody else telling you anybody else is the voice of rock. That man is the voice of rock. See you next time.
We hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. Please like and subscribe to our channel. See you soon.